because the resources were being used up in all these religious ceremonies. Instead of them being safe for food, they were burning stuff up and just partying every weekend in the hope that this god or goddess or whoever else would help. And they were also, because they'd been isolated in Egypt by their own, they were really subjected to a lot of venereal diseases at the time that really hit them hard. Syphilis and stuff, they just had no immune systems for it. And so they were getting sicker and more desperate. And so Moses, and apparently about 70 of the leaders of the tribe, went up in the mountain, had a 3-day conference, came down with a whole bunch of rules, and that didn't really work very well. So they had another session and came back with 10 rules. And so when they came back after the second session with the 10 commandments, it was sort of chaos. It was like this big party. And according to their own documents, I think they killed 5,000 of their own men, women, and children that were engaged in pagan practices when they came down from the mountain. It was like, okay, folks, this just isn't working. You're partying too much. They just, killed a large group of their own people for, various reasons, and said to the rest, okay, no more worship of other gods and goddesses. No more touching the neighbor's wife. Just a whole bunch of rules that, came down. And from that point forward, the population, for example, wasn't allowed to use cannabis without the authorization of the religious authority, led by Moses. Before that, it was pretty much, open for people to worship whenever they wanted, whoever they wanted, right? But at that point, it was like, no, we're going to tell you when and where to worship, and anyone that deviates from these things is going to be killed. It's not you're going to be, just brushed aside or whatever. It's like if you deviate from these prohibitions, you will be killed. How long that lasted for, whether Moses even existed, honestly, is debatable. But really, a lot of people believe very strongly in the 10 Commandments of Moses and don't really understand that was the prohibition of the worship of other deities to the death. And that was the beginning of a monotheistic religion, of a very militant group of people. And so that was the roots of Prohibition, and I could go on, obviously, but time is slipping. I'd like to get, kind of jump a few things here. But, obviously that was just a bunch of freaks in the desert. Like, they didn't affect the whole world. Most of the world at the time, like Greece and other parts of the Mesopotamia and the Middle East, they were thriving, right? It was the formation of the Roman Catholic Church that really brought prohibition to the greater world. And the reasons for the creation of the Roman Catholic Church are almost deserving of a lecture in and of itself. In fact, I think one of my earlier ones I really focused on, like the Jesus and how he was sort of used almost as an excuse to create the Roman Catholic Church for some real crazy power freaks. And the Roman Emperor Constantine thought that he'd be able to keep his economy together if everyone was forced to actually pay their taxes to the church and not be allowed to pay taxes. Actually, at first Constantine would allow anybody to worship any other religion. Sorry.
He still did.
Yeah, in 325, because he worshipped Apollo and stuff. It was 387 that the Council of Nicaea came in with the prohibitions that were carried out to the death. So it was 387 that if anybody worshipped a religion other than the Roman Catholic Church in Rome, they were like the Christians being caged up with the lions. They were persecuted to the death. And that was really the beginning of the Dark Ages in so many ways. The picture that I have in the handout there, I guess Chris Bennett is more of an expert on the alchemists and stuff, but prohibition and the the punishing of people that use plants to heal or to enlighten has been going on certainly since the formation of the Roman Catholic Church. But that didn't stop people like us from using this plant. And this picture here is a picture of some alchemists, because they came up with this idea of turning lead into gold as being a way to convince the church and the monarchs to leave them alone while they had their laboratories so they could study plants and other things. and would convince the leaders, oh, we're trying to turn lead into gold, right? We're going to make you millionaires. Just like, give us some more time here, right? We're working on it. And they come up with all these sorts of stories and scams and things to try and convince the Pope and stuff. And the Pope was out there at certain points, burning people at the stake for being accused of witchcraft, and at the same time was funding his own alchemists to try to turn lead into gold. But it was really, at the same time, a great analogy for turning the leaden mind of an average man into the golden mind of an enlightened being. And so in a lot of these pictures, like here, you can see at the top, the guy's burning hashish in a tent, right? Which is an ancient practice that goes back, far back into time. And so they couldn't actually, say what he was doing in this, but there's a lot of ones where I can, you can see little mushrooms sometimes, and I have some other books, where you can see how the images of the green lion, for example, that's an ancient symbol for the cannabis plant, and the sort of the energy, the deity that would take over. And so the alchemists did a great job keeping this plant and some of its history alive for us, but at the same time, the Dark Ages were successful, if for no other reason, for killing people for using plants for over 1,000 years. A lot of our history has been lost, to the point where by the 1800s, the cannabis plant had taken several different forms, and there had been hemp being grown, I guess, since the days of the Roman Catholic Church. In a lot of ways, they didn't prohibit the use of hemp. They would use rope and allow it to be used for that. And so at that point, I think a real division occurred. But the study of the genetics is quite different. But anyway. Okay, I have 5 minutes to talk about reefer madness. So, in the 1800s, hemp was probably the most used crop in the planet. Napoleon actually invaded Russia to burn down the hemp fields because England needed the Russian hemp for their navy, because the canvas and rope on their ships demanded a lot of hemp. And when they lost the cheap source of hemp in Russia, the English started to tax the American colonies more, and actually you could pay your taxes to the English in hemp for a while, and they passed all sorts of laws at times demanding people grew like 10% of their fields with hemp and stuff like that. The American colonies got so fed up with being taxed, first and foremost for their hemp, because all the best hemp was being taken away, and took a lot of effort to make. And so very much one of the main reasons of the American Revolution was people not wanting to give up their hemp to the English. And so the hemp was very heavily used for a bunch of things. Paints and varnishes even were starting to get made of it. The real reason, or there's a lot of reasons, but in 1916, they came up, or maybe, sorry, the year before, with the process to turn the herds, or the cork, in the middle of the plant into paper. Before that time, all the ancient paper, like the stuff Kristen made, was pretty much out of the fibers on the outside of the plant. But like most plants, you got sort of a cork in the middle, and then the bark is the fiber on the outside. And one of the first things that you would typically do in harvesting it would be to try and dry it or ret it and break the fiber away from the herds. Well, in 1916, the herds, which were just a waste product, could all of a sudden be made into paper. And then in 1917, the invention of the decorticator by George Schlitzkin made the processing of hemp much more efficient. It's basically a combine. You can go into a field, cut the plant down, break it up, you'd have some beautiful fiber to make into cloth, and then hemp on the other hand. And the two inventions made the plant like 100 times more valuable for a farmer to sell and turn into products in the market within 2 years. That information was very threatening to the newspaper industry, because they had just invested heavily into basically cutting down old growth forest and turning it into newspapers. It was far cheaper to just cut down trees and to pay farmers every year to grow something. And so it really threatened their economic interests, and takes a lot of chemicals to make paper, takes a lot of chemicals to produce cotton. Cotton farmers had resentment towards black people because they allowed them to grow cannabis as slaves, to use it as herb and smoke it and such. And then they actually grew hemp as well. So the cotton farmers knew the relationship between hemp and cannabis a little bit more than most, and I think helped Randolph Hearst and the Hearst newspaper company come up with the term marijuana and the whole campaign. But it goes much deeper than that. At the time, one of the great debates was whether to use fossil fuels or vegetable-based fuels. The diesel engine was built to burn vegetable fuels, but it didn't seem efficient to build two different engines and systems. There wasn't a sort of a definite direction to go in. And so petrochemical companies and fossil fuel companies were working really heavy to corner the market. Alcohol prohibition was enacted in part so that farmers couldn't distill alcohol products or make their own fuels on their own properties. So some of the farmers actually turned to seed crops, but it was sort of too late by then. These guys were going crazy. So the main guy behind Prohibition is Andrew Mellon, richest guy in the world at the time. He set up General Motors, DuPont Chemicals, and was a big banker down in New York and stuff, made himself millions. He became the Secretary Treasurer for the United States, so he decided where all the money went, who got contracts, what products were bought within the military and schools and all this sort of stuff. They erased hemp from the records. They stopped investing in any hemp research. They did everything that they could to take hemp out of the government and out of the economy. All these large corporations, did everything they could to cut it out. And it was something that the corporations and rich had such great control of things in some sense that it was made illegal here in Canada in 1923, just a few years after some of these inventions. The US was much more democratic at the time, at least, so it took till 1937 before all these laws and things got put through. The only two groups that opposed the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 were the American Medical Association, because the doctors had been kept out of this. They had no idea the Marijuana Tax Act actually applied to the cannabis that they were using and giving to people. And so they were shocked and appalled, and if you read the record, they opposed it 100%. And the poultry farmers, because nothing makes birds produce eggs or to grow and be healthy and happy as much as hemp seed. And so hemp seed was being used a lot by poultry farmers. In fact, I think canaries will not sing without hemp seed. That is what makes canaries sing. And so those are the two groups that oppose the Marijuana Tax Act. But really, the multinational corporations, were just so much in control and wanted to eliminate hemp because farmers could grow their own fuel, they could heat their homes, they could provide the excess mash from the seeds to feed their animals, feed their families, they'd have stock left for sale. It would have revived the agricultural communities. And I'm involved in this because of banks ripping off the world and even to a point my family. I'm 7th-generation farmer on both sides from Ontario. My dad's side has been growing food and been on the farm for 200 years here in Canada. I don't think there's a single one of my cousins that can afford a family farm where I'm from because the costs have gone so much. My uncle just had to sell his dairy quota on the old family farm because it's just become too expensive, and corporations are buying up farmland, they're buying up our food resources and controlling almost everything that people are doing in the economy in this day and age. And so the history of Prohibition is very personal to me because it's affected my family, it's affected my world, and it's very unfortunate, but it's wonderful to see it being revived, people becoming more involved, hemp's being grown now, and being used for so many different products that I'm learning and seeing more all the time. In our newspaper, we got even a hemp car, finally again, like Robert or Henry Ford's, with the hemp body, and it's an electric car, which he couldn't even do at the time, so it's coming out of Alberta. There's things happening all over right now that are just exciting and inspiring, and I see the planet waking up And I really hope to be, in a few years, talking about the history of prohibition in cannabis is truly the history of it. But right now, we got to fight S10. Anything you can do to help, we have 1-800 O-Canada number that you can call. Tell Michael Ignatieff to stop S10, study the cost. They put $9 billion aside. They're building 22 new prisons in Canada right now, and those 22 prisons are being built for people like me. They don't know the cost of operating these. They have not studied them. They've told people they don't want to. We want Michael Ignatieff and the Liberal Party to tell the Conservatives and the Parliament and Canada that they want to study the cost of this bill before they implement it. And so please help fight Bill S10 in every way possible. These Conservatives are just zealots of the Moses type. Thanks everybody for coming out. Have a good day.